The chaotic lives of legendary pirates. Before Edward Blackbeard Teach lit fuses in his beard, there was Henry Every, the real pirate king, the man who pulled off the biggest heist in pirate history and got away with it. Born between 1653 and 1659 in Devon, England, although not much can be verified about his early life, Henry likely had the usual start for a seafaring man of his time. He served on merchant ships and in the Royal Navy, gaining valuable skills and experiencing firsthand how poorly sailors were treated. Wages were often late, food was rotten, and discipline was brutal. So, when the opportunity came to take matters into his own hands, Every didn't hesitate. In 1693, Henry joined the Spanish Expedition Shipping, a venture organized by wealthy English merchants and commissioned by their allies. Their goal was to supply, salvage, and trade with the Spanish while plundering any French ships they could find in the Spanish Indies. At the time, due to his previous experience, Henry was working as a second mate on the flagship Charles II, named after the Spanish king. This seemed like a sweet gig until it wasn't. Unfortunately for Henry, when it was time to sail from England, nothing went according to plan. First, the captain of the flagship died before the voyage began. Then, due to an unknown reason, their trip to Spain was prolonged from a mere 2 weeks to 5 months. Unpaid, of course. Then, the expedition was forced to stay docked in Spain due to the required paperwork not arriving on time. This extended the voyage by several more months of unpaid work, which obviously agitated the already exhausted crew. After several petitions to the captains and the admiral in charge of the expedition had failed to secure their wages, something had to change. In 1694, Every had organized a mutiny. He seized the flagship without spilling blood, renamed it to Fancy, and set sail for the Indian Ocean. In 1695, Every and his crew struck gold, literally. Off the coast of Yemen, they joined a small pirate fleet consisting of 5 ships lying in wait for the Mughal treasure fleet returning to India from a pilgrimage to Mecca. Every was named admiral of this fleet and found himself commanding around 450 men. Among the targets was the Ganj-e-Sawai, the Mughal Empire's flagship, laden with untold riches. The Mughal ship was a floating fortress, bristling with 80 cannons and a 1,000-man crew. Despite that, Every's men were desperate and well-practiced in violence. They stormed the ship, overwhelmed the defenders, and took everything. Gold, silver, jewels. Fortunes so vast that most pirates became rich enough to retire on the spot. Some accounts describe horrific treatment of passengers during the raid, including violence against the Mughal women on board. Whether exaggerated or not, the event caused international outrage. The Mughal Emperor Aurangzeb demanded blood, and the English East India Company scrambled to distance itself from the scandal. Very quickly, Every became the most wanted man in the world. England, desperate to appease the furious Mughal Empire and protect its trading interests, issued the first-ever global manhunt with bounties posted in every major port. They reimbursed the emperor for his losses of upwards of 600,000 pounds that were looted, which would be upwards of 120 million British pounds adjusted for inflation. And yet, Henry vanished. Some of his crew were caught and hanged, grim reminders that piracy was a risky career. But Every himself slipped through the cracks of history. Having fed his men different stories of where he would go, a manhunt lasted for decades. Every time officials had an idea of his whereabouts, by the time they got there, there was no trace of the guy. Some say he changed his name and lived quietly in England, dying penniless. Others believe he escaped to a distant paradise, living out his days rich beyond imagination. The truth, however, is lost to time. Now, for every pirate king who slipped through history's fingers, there were those who could barely keep hold of their own ship. Meet Stede Bonnet, the gentleman pirate who proved that piracy isn't for everyone. Stede Bonnet was a wealthy landowner from Barbados. He had everything a colonial gentleman could ask for: money, a plantation, a wife, and children. And yet, Around 1717, due to reasons lost to history, he decided that a life of violent theft on the high seas sounded more fulfilling than managing sugarcane. Unlike most pirates, Bonnet didn't seize a ship. He bought one. He paid for a 10-gun sloop, named it the Revenge, hired a crew which he paid a salary out of his own pocket, and set off on a life of crime. The problem? Bonnet had zero sailing experience. He wasn't a sailor. He wasn't even particularly charismatic. He didn't know how to fight, and his crew quickly realized they'd signed up with someone who had more money than sense. His early attempts at piracy were clumsy to say the least. He sailed up and down the American coastline, attacking merchant vessels with some success, capturing 4 ships peacefully, and burning a Barbadian one to keep news of his crimes from reaching home. Eventually, he was wounded in a fight and sought refuge in Nassau, the pirate haven of the Bahamas. That's where he met Edward Teach, better known as Blackbeard. The two established a strange, one-sided bromance. Blackbeard convinced Bonnet to relieve command of his ship to him, and used Bonnet as a sort of figurehead, letting him believe he was still in charge, while clearly running the show. At some point, Bonnet realized this and tried to reclaim authority. "Hey guys, can I be the captain now, please?" But it was too late, as the crew was tired by his lack of leadership and sailing skills, clearly favoring Blackbeard. After sailing under Teach for a while, regaining captaincy and losing it again, Bonnet tried to go straight and accepted a royal pardon. But piracy called him back. He returned to sea under the alias of Captain Thomas, an attempt to not forsake his pardon, and attacked ships along the Carolina coast, only to be cornered and captured by Colonel William Rhett in the summer of 1718. At his trial, Bonnet wept. He pleaded for mercy. He even tried to fake insanity and asked to be pardoned again. None of it worked, and the court was done with him. He was hanged in Charleston in December 1718. His body was left swinging from the gallows as a warning to others, and later got buried at an unmarked location in nearby marshlands. In life, he was known as a gentleman pirate due to his background and demeanor. After demise, history remembered him as an underqualified lunatic who tossed away his fortune to escape his wife and kids and become a mediocre pirate at best. In the end, he got nothing to show for the time he spent at sea, and his pirating journey ended almost as quickly as it started. Now, if Stede Bonnet was the worst pirate of the era, then Blackbeard was the most unforgettable. Before his piratical fame, Teach served as a privateer during the War of the Spanish Succession, attacking Spanish ships under a legal commission. But when peace returned, he, like many former privateers, turned to piracy. Around 1716, he joined the crew of Benjamin Hornigold and quickly rose through the ranks, earning a reputation as bold, cunning, and utterly fearless. After Hornigold accepted a pardon, Blackbeard took reins. He captured a large French slave ship, which he refitted and renamed to Queen Anne's Revenge. Now commanding a heavily armed vessel and a sizable crew, Blackbeard began terrorizing the West Indies and the American colonies. He famously tied slow-burning fuses into his thick, braided beard and lit them before battle, an intimidation tactic that worked wonders for his PR. Dressed in black, strapped with pistols, and carrying multiple cutlasses, he looked more like a nightmare than a naval officer. The psychological effect was devastating, with most ships surrendering after learning who was after them. Despite his hellish appearance, Blackbeard was surprisingly pragmatic. He preferred fear over bloodshed. There's little evidence he killed anyone who didn't resist. His leadership relied more on image and reputation than cruelty. He cultivated the persona of a sea demon, but in reality he was more calculating, and at times oddly restrained. He ran with Stede Bonnet for some time, bolstered his fleet, and in 1718 he pulled off one of his boldest moves, blockading the port of Charleston, South Carolina. He held the entire city hostage, not for gold, but for medicine. He ransacked passing ships, capturing passengers, including prominent citizens, and threatened executing them if no medication was delivered. Fortunately for the hostages, Charleston came through and he let them go unscathed. Shortly after, he accepted a royal pardon from North Carolina's governor and briefly retired to a semi-respectable life. but piracy had its pull, and Blackbeard returned to the sea. This time, colonial authorities had had enough. Governor Alexander Spotswood of Virginia, frustrated by Blackbeard's repeated offenses after the pardon, authorized a military operation to take him down. 2 armed sloops and 60 men were dispatched to hunt down Blackbeard. On November 22, 1718, the 2 forces clashed. The governor's forces outnumbered the reduced crew of Blackbeard 2-1, and by the end of the brutal engagement, Teach had been shot 5 times and slashed more than 20. When he finally fell, he had his head severed and hung from the bowsprit as proof of death and a warning to others. Even after death, his legend grew, embellished by stories, ghostly sightings, and devilish deals. Though much of it was exaggerated by 18th century newspapers and pulp writers, the impact he had on history was very real. Not all pirates were born villains like Blackbeard, however. Some, like Black Sam Bellamy, were just romantics with bad timing. Born in Devon, England, in 1689, Bellamy grew up poor but ambitious. He sailed to Cape Cod as a young man, and legend says that he fell in love with a local girl, Maria or Goody Hallett, depending on the source. Her family disapproved of his low status, and that rejection seems to have lit a fire in him. Determined to earn a fortune and return as a worthy suitor, Bellamy took to the sea. At first, he worked as a sailor, but eventually he joined forces with the infamous pirate Benjamin Hornigold, who also mentored a young Blackbeard. Bellamy quickly proved himself, and when Hornigold refused to attack English ships, the crew voted him out, and Bellamy became captain. His defining moment came in 1717, when he captured the Whydah Galley, a massive, heavily armed slave ship loaded with riches. Bellamy converted it into his flagship, outfitting it with 28 guns and assembling a fleet. He gained a reputation as a fair and democratic leader. His crew adored him, and his enemies often admired his restraint, as he was known for being merciful when plundering, earning him the moniker Prince of Pirates and Robin Hood of the Sea. Despite his idealism, he was no soft touch. He took dozens of prizes along the American coastline and amassed a considerable treasure. He treated prisoners humanely, but he demanded discipline from his crew. Bellamy walked a fine line between outlaw and visionary. His plan was to return to Cape Cod, marry Maria, and start a new life. But fate had other plans. In April 1717, his ship was caught in a violent storm off the coast of Cape Cod. It struck a sandbar and capsized, killing nearly everyone on board, including Bellamy. He was just 28 years old, and about a year into his pirating journey when that happened. In his life, he and his crew captured over 50 ships, making him the wealthiest pirate of the Golden Age. For centuries, his flagship remained lost beneath the waves. Then, in the 1980s, it was discovered, along with thousands of artifacts, including gold and silver coins, cannons, and personal items. It became the first authenticated pirate shipwreck ever found in North America. Thank you for watching. Besides these 4 chaps, there were many more pirates famous for good and bad reasons. If you'd be interested in seeing a part 2, let me know. In the meantime, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I will see you next time.